Here we will examine the facial bones belonging to the skull. The facial bones consist of the maxilla bones, which form the upper jaw and hold the upper set of teeth, the mandible bone, which forms the lower jaw and holds the lower set of teeth, the nasal bones, which form the bony bridge of the nose, the lacrimal bones, which are small rectangular bones that form part of the wall between the orbits or the eye sockets and the nasal cavity. These contain canals that will drain tears from the eyes into the nasal cavity. The palatine bone forms part of the wall of the nasal cavity and extends downward to form the bony roof of the mouth, along with the maxilla bone, which also forms part of the bony roof of the mouth. The zygomatic bones form the bony cheeks on the lateral sides of the face. The inferior nasal concha, which are found in the lower lateral walls of the nasal cavity. These bones function to increase the surface area within the nasal cavity and create turbulence for air that is moving into the nasal cavity. Turbulence of that moving air helps to promote mixing of the air within the nasal cavity for the purpose of warming and humidifying that incoming air, in addition to aiding with the mixing of odors for the function of the sense of smell. The vomer bone, which is also found within the nasal cavity, it's found along the inferior midline of the nasal cavity. It forms part of the nasal septum with the ethmoid bone. Figure 7.4 highlights the facial bones that are seen from an anterior view of the skull. The nasal bones form the bony bridge of the nose situated between the maxilla and the frontal bone. A small part of the palatine bone can be seen within the eye socket. More of this bone will be visible from underneath. The vomer bone forms part of the nasal septum of the nasal cavity, along with part of the ethmoid bone that extends down from above. The maxilla bones form the upper jaw and hold the upper teeth. The lacrimal bones are located in the wall between the orbit and the nasal cavity. The zygomatic bone forms the cheekbone of the face. The lateral walls of the nasal cavity hold the inferior nasal conchae bones. Finally, the mandible bone forms the bone of the lower jaw and supports the lower row of teeth. Figure 7.5, a lateral view of the skull. We have a much better view of the lacrimal and the extent of the zygomatic bones, along with lateral views of the upper and lower jaw that are formed by the maxilla and mandible bones, respectively. From figure 7.8, an inferior perspective, the vomer bone can be seen extending into the space where the nasal cavity ends and the throat, which is a region called the pharynx, would begin. From this view, we can also now see the majority of the palatine bones, which form the bony roof of the mouth that separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity. Part of that roof of the mouth is also formed by the maxilla bones. The underside of the zygomatic bone is also seen from this perspective.